In the dead of night, Obama did it. He signed the bill to put free speech in America under a board of governors made up of the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Defense, as well as the State Department. This is how the old Soviet Union was run. This is a dark day for the First Amendment, and the left and establishment Republicans are in ecstasy. Last week, as we approached the Christmas holiday weekend, I made a prediction that unfortunately wasn't very hard to make, that Obama would try to sign draconian legislation over the weekend. The reason I was able to predict that was this is what Obama does every Christmas holiday weekend. And it's what other presidents in the last few decades have done as well, though not with Obama's punctuality. So late on Friday night, President Obama signed the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA 2017. There wasn't anything in there about strengthening our borders. There wasn't anything in there about trying to get veterans more funding for all their ailments and not just throwing them out on the streets. No, ladies and gentlemen, there wasn't anything in there about the $1 trillion+ program, upwards of $1.5 billion per plane for the massively failed boondoggle of the F-35. That isn't even as good as an F-15 from 30 years ago, the Pentagon tells us. No, there wasn't anything in there about that. What there was a massive announcement of a new Ministry of Truth that dwarfs anything in the former Soviet Union to be run by the Department of Defense and Homeland Security. Long before Hillary lost, long before dying MSM rolled out this call to licensed reporters and shut down blogs and news organizations like InfoWars, Homeland Security, bipartisanly, along with a string of multinational corporations and central banks, have been lobbying to bring in a system to control what can be printed and what can be broadcast and what can be transmitted here in the United States. True draconian police state censorship. But this is okay because they say they're legalizing it. Kind of like the CIA was legalized 3 years ago to engage in domestic propaganda. Now they're just getting the funding. So let's look deep inside some of the provisions of the bill that is now law, thanks to President Obama. You may recall that it was reported on in early June that a bill to implement the U.S. very own de facto Ministry of Truth had been quietly introduced into Congress. As with any legislation attempting to dodge the public spotlight, the Countering Foreign Propaganda and Disinformation Act of 2016 marks a further curtailment of press freedom and another avenue to stultify avenues of accurate information. Introduced by Congressman Adam Kinzinger and Ted Lieu, H.R. 5181 seeks a whole government approach, this is a quote, a whole government approach without the bureaucratic restrictions, to counter, quote, foreign disinformation and manipulation, which they define as Donald Trump, InfoWars, Matt Drudge, Breitbart. They openly say we're Russian agents. Isn't that hilarious? But it's not funny because they've actually now put this into law. In fact, who do you think they're talking about right here? Continued. Also called the Countering Information Warfare Act of 2016 in the Senate, or S-2692, when introduced in March by Senator Rob Portman, the legislation represents a dramatic return to Cold War-era government propaganda battles, which they now are directing onto the Tea Party and the new president that wants to make America great again and cut our taxes, defend our borders. Has nothing to do with foreign powers. But this is how they're getting the authorization to come after free speech, claiming we're in a war. It's why Soros and the Democrats have been trying to start a civil war. Portman continued, there is currently no single U.S. governmental agency or department charged with the national level development, integration, and synchronization of whole of government strategies to counter foreign propaganda and disinformation. Yeah, that's because our government's supposed to be for, by, we the people. That's because it's supposed to be different political parties and different ideas and not some central bureaucratic message at the American people, even though we know this has been going on forever. I mean, look at the former Attorney General getting up on C-SPAN and telling the media, we've got to work hard to brainwash the public against guns. The truth is their unified propaganda offensive that WikiLeaks breaks down is absolutely falling apart. And this attempt to enslave our republic will fail as well. In fact, I know they've jumped the shark here. This will now make any information coming out of the government as credible as that of Pravda during the Cold War. Continuing from Zero Hedge, whose analysis mirrors our own at InfoWars. Long before the, quote, fake news meme became a daily topic of extensive conversation on such discredited mainstream portals as CNN, The Washington Post, HR 5181 would task the Secretary of State with coordinating the Secretary of Defense, the Director of National Intelligence, and the Broadcasting Board of Governors to establish a Center for Information Analysis and Response, which will pinpoint sources of disinformation, analyze data, and in true dystopic manner, develop and disseminate fact-based narratives to counter effrontery propaganda. You heard that right. Centralized, basically controlled by George Soros. And how do we know that? They've already announced at Facebook, Google, Twitter, you name it, they're going to use George Soros-financed mail-order catalog university where you can literally mail-order diplomas. They have 6 employees. It's a leftist group. And Snopes run by leftists, 2 people and their cat, to decide what can be disseminated, what can be seen, so they're going to block you sharing your information. Already, my father and other people I know personally get Snopes emails every day. They never signed up for them saying, counter this, counter that, here's the truth, here's the lies, when this is a known disinformation outlet. The American people are already trying to vomit up this globalist propaganda. But now the establishment says, oh, the answer is we didn't have enough propaganda. Let's waterboard the American people with disinformation and anti-American, anti-family, anti-gun, anti-private property, anti-white crap. In short, long before fake news became a major media topic, the U.S. government was already planning its legally backed crackdown on anything it would eventually label fake news. Fast forward to December 8th when the Countering Disinformation Propaganda Act passed the Senate quietly, inserted inside the 2017 National Defense Authorization Act, NDAA, conference report. And now, following Friday's Obama signing of the NDAA on Friday evening, the Countering Disinformation Propaganda Act is now law. Read the full article for yourself. It's powerful. It's on Infowars.com and ZeroHedge.com. Obama enacts Ministry of Truth as public focuses on holidays. And that's exactly what's happening. In closing, I want to leave you with 3 points that are absolutely central, critical to this republic having any future as a free nation. Number 1, we've got to organize against this. We've got to expose it, and we've got to redouble our efforts using the First Amendment to absolutely expose this draconian evil. We have to also really push to get not just independent media, but mainstream corporate media to have a soul, and for more whistleblowers and leakers inside the government and inside controlled corporate press to get information out about what's really happening. And of course, we need to get President-elect Donald Trump, who'll be in office in about 22 days, to come out and reaffirm the First Amendment and decry this push to label anything critical of government policies or the Democratic Party as treason. And it's very important to understand the Republican Party and Democratic parties are on the ropes. They're the ones bought and paid for criminally by multinationals. They're the collaborators. And so they have a stake in allowing this free speech annihilation to actually be put in place, because they can't handle the truth. And the media they list as Russian agents and others is the media that's actually promoting sovereignty for this republic. I've got to hand it to the globalists, though. Mainstream media gets caught via WikiLeaks, staging the campaigns, leaking information to Hillary. They talk about how to keep the public in the dark and how they're controlling us. I mean, it is just a handbook of villainous admissions of how ruthless and anti-freedom they are. And so we've got to continue to expose what is in the WikiLeaks and just point out that this is the last dying gasp of the big corporate media and both the major political parties. And the strongest place to blast them is on their own propaganda. They claim those of us that want to defend the Second Amendment and private property and family rights and religious rights and our borders and who want to have our tariffs be the same as other countries on average, they claim those of us that really are pro-America and that have pedigrees to prove it on top of it are the bad guys, when the globalists are the ones trying to end our culture, end our sovereignty, and turn us into this dumbed-down mass of idiots. I mean, think about how Communist China comes out and lectures us in the People's Daily, and then it's put in our own newspapers, that they're involved helping the U.S. government learn how to censor Americans. And the Communist Chinese and the Saudi Arabians and the Pope and the EU were all involved in our election. They're the ones, the globalists, that were all ganging up on the American people like a bunch of bullies, and we stood up to them and we said no. So they don't know what to do now. They are in complete and total, absolute panic mode. And they're not going to stop until we let these bullies know that we're fully conscious of what they're doing. Quite frankly, I'm very sad that the country's gotten to this position, but you notice the more tyrannical they get, the faster people wake up. And since Carrie Fisher's been in the hospital, I hope she gets better. I'll use a cheesy Star Wars analogy. The tighter you squeeze, the more star systems or countries or people are going to slip through your fingers. And that is the historical fact. We found the will to fight back against globalism. It's the outside foreign threat. It's the system destroying our country. It's the system trying to destroy our basic Bill of Rights and Constitution. And Americans of every race, color, and creed are coming together, despite the mainstream media's race baiting, despite the incredible divide and conquer, and are more and more seeing through it. So the fact that they're trying to bring in true authoritarian controls over the press shows just how desperate they are and what a critical crossroads we've all reached. That's why I want to encourage you all to not take the First Amendment for granted and to realize whether we're old, young, black, white, Hispanic, Asian, live in the North, the South, the East, the West, or in the UK, or in Germany, or in Russia, or in Japan, or in Nigeria, or in Mexico, or in Brazil, or in Australia. It doesn't matter. We should all agree on a free press. And we should certainly know that the Communist Chinese, who banned their free speech in 1996 on the internet under the guise of restricting fake news, are outrageously arrogant being involved in our own internal activities. President Trump needs to speak up and needs to come out and defend the First Amendment and needs to say, what are you doing? It's the media that was run by the Saudi Arabians and the Chinese that was involved in our election, lying about me and my supporters and independent press. How dare you try to pass something where the Pentagon is over free speech in America? This is crazy. Look, I'm not going to sit here and say, see, I told you so, that communist Chinese-style net censorship was coming to the web, because it's already here. It's being announced. The way you keep the internet open and free is you get involved more than ever. Go to Infowars.com/app. A new battleship in the fight. Infowars Live, available right now. We're looking for a crew to man it. You gonna sit down and play games and be a trendy? Or are you gonna be part of history? Don't sit by and let the internet and free speech be stolen from you. Take action.